In this video, I want to give you some tips for building these sawhorses. This design is an original. I created the design about 25 years ago, and I really like this way of making sawhorses, mostly because the results are super, super solid. There's no wiggliness or anything. I have about 6 or 8 of these at any given time. They all live outside because I don't have room to accommodate them indoors, and they will fail from rot long before they'll ever even begin to get wiggly. So let me start by talking about the top. That's what you see here. I like to use a 2x6 for this. Here in this drawing, it's shown as being 60 inches long. You can make it shorter, even somewhat longer. The length is not too critical. I do like to have matching pairs of sawhorses that are the same length. That works well together, but the exact dimension really isn't critical. Now, I mentioned that these sawhorses are particularly solid, and I want you to look at the end view here for that. The reason for the solidity is because of angles and bracing. So looking at this end view here, you can see we have a triangular shape that is thoroughly braced top and bottom by some cross pieces. They're not fancy. I have never bothered angling the ends. You can do that if you like, but instead I just cut them to length, fasten them on with some screws to the legs, and it works really well. It stops them from splaying out more. So that's one reason why these sawhorses are solid, because of the solidity in this direction. But there's also another direction too, and if you look at this side view, you'll see what I mean. Each pair of legs is not vertical. It's splayed out a little bit. In this case, I'm showing 5 degrees from perpendicular. And that's crucial. It makes all the difference in the world for keeping things solid. Now, that 5 degree from perpendicular could not be maintained just based on these screws that you see going in here. And by the way, you could use nails. I like to use screws. They hold a lot better. And if you ever need to take your sawhorse apart because a part got broken, something fell on it, and maybe one of the legs is broken and everything else is good, you can pull it apart very easily if you've used deck screws. But this brace, you can see it down here, is 45 degrees from horizontal. That's key. That keeps the legs splayed out, this 5 degrees from perpendicular, and it holds it there very, very solidly. So adding those diagonal braces is really the last thing you'll do during construction. Everything is straightforward in this design, but there is one tricky bit that I want to talk to you about now, and it has to do with cutting the angle at the top of the legs. This angle is shallow enough, so this angle here that I'm showing you is pointy enough, it's thin enough, that it's difficult to cut this on a power saw. And at this stage in your development, you probably don't even have a power saw. So you need to cut that critical angle in a different way. And that's why I want you to look at this drawing. Because what we want here is about 30 degrees from parallel. So in other words, about 60 degrees from square. Look down here, you can see this is a scale drawing, so you can see what 30 degrees looks like. It's just about perfect for a sawhorse. So how do you cut that? How do you cut this angle here? Because not only is it fairly shallow, but it's on the edge of a piece of wood. So we've got to cut through a lot of wood here at the correct angle. And what I like to use is a good handsaw. The same handsaw you're using for all of this initial work here in the course. And laying out the angle is very easy. All you need to do is to mark a line that's 2.5 inches from the end of your piece for the leg. So if you imagine the leg would start off as just a regular, in this case, 28-inch long piece of 2x4, and from one end, you go down 2.5 inches and make a mark. So now with your handsaw, you're going to cut from the corner of the board to that 2.5-inch mark, and you're going to cut down square. So it's going to continue down, as you can see here, so that the top edge remains square to the sides of the 2x4 legs. If you do that with your handsaw, you're going to have the correct angle on the top of the legs, and it's really going to work quite well. As I said, that's the trickiest part. Everything else is just a matter of assembly. Another important tip is the need, well, not the need, the advisability to use glue on all the joints for this sawhorse. Now, technically, you don't need to do that, and your sawhorses will probably be fully solid, even if you don't use glue, but it's cheap insurance. It just ensures that everything's going to be as solid as it needs to be, and it's going to remain that way. Now, when it comes to glue, because sawhorses are often used outside, you'll want to use something called weatherproof glue, and that's the best kind that I like. It looks just like regular wood glue. You can even wash it up with water when it's still wet, but once it's dried, it undergoes a chemical change that makes it insoluble in water after that. My favorite kind right now is called Tight Bond 3, and it's fabulous. It just works really well. There's no need to finish sawhorses like this unless you really want to have a certain color, but it really doesn't matter that much. And as I've said before, you're going to want to use deck screws for putting this together, not nails. You'll also want to make them in pairs, because ideally you're going to need at least 2 sawhorses of the same height in order to work properly. In practice, I actually like to have 4, because when you're cutting a piece of wood, say it's resting on these sawhorses up off the ground, you're cutting the piece of wood. If you only have 2 and you make a cut in the middle of the board, well, the board is going to buckle. It's not going to be supported. It's going to pinch your saw when the cut is coming to its completion. But if you have 4, then both sides of the piece of wood you're cutting, both halves, are going to be fully supported by 2 sawhorses, and it works great. And it makes a lot more sense to make a bunch of sawhorses at once, too, because it certainly boosts efficiency tremendously. Not only do you have all the tools out, but you're making all the same cuts at the same time with marking things out in the same way. So decide ahead of time how many you're going to make, and then just get all your materials and make them that way in one big batch. You'll love the efficiency, and I guarantee you'll love these sawhorses. They're as solid as granite. So I'm pretty much finished this video now, but I wanted to introduce you to this file here. This is one of the downloadable files that you can get as part of the curriculum material, and it's drawn in a program called SketchUp. Now, SketchUp is tremendously powerful and fairly complicated to use, but all you need to do for this project is to just look at the drawings and see if you can gain something from this 3-dimensional view. The main virtue of this view is that you can move around. I think you'll find this most valuable when you're actually putting the sawhorse together, because you can, it's essentially like having a completed sawhorse right in front of you as far as examining all the parts and how they fit together. Now, I'm using a program called SketchUp Viewer to view this, and that's what I recommend you download too. It's free. You can't draw anything with it, but you can certainly examine things. The ability, if you want to call it that, of not being able to draw on this is probably a good thing, because you're not going to tamper with the drawing and change it and mess it up and things like that. If you want to learn how to draw with SketchUp, then you can go online and you can find the program, and there's various options for it. But just a couple of things here as we finish up. I'm going to align this here. Look over here. This really nicely shows the outward splay of the legs, about 5 degrees or so. It doesn't take much, but it adds tremendous stability to the sawhorse. And of course, looking at it from this side, we can see the other angles involved. Just the normal splay of the legs is what you see here. And then these braces. These are absolutely key. Without these, the sawhorse is not going to be strong. And same goes for these angle braces here. They absolutely have to be in place and secure. If you put those things in place, though, this is one solid sawhorse. Really think you're going to like the design.